Welcome back to Book and Lounge. And today I have got Taiwo, Annette, and Katrina. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hi, hi.
Cool. Thank you so much for sparing your Wednesday evening to discuss assembly. I hope, given as one of us doesn't like the book, one of us is on the fence, and one of us really love the book, we're going to have a very interesting conversation. So, firstly, assembly, what is it about?
The story for me is about the mental disintegration of a black woman
And why is she mentally disintegrating?
because she's recognizing that she's in the matrix, but rather than taking the blue pill, she took the red one.
I do agree that it is a mental deterioration of a black woman, but I think, the reason as to why she's mentally deteriorating is, I think, the interesting part for me. So the protagonist remains unnamed. In fact, the majority of the characters in the book remain unnamed. The protagonist is this young black woman who's working in a bank. She's got a high-paid job. She's made a lot of money. She's bought a house, and she's dating this well-to-do young man, and pretty much seems to have everything that you'd want in life to be happy, but she's not happy. And so I guess the book is sort of a collection of her thoughts and her interactions with her colleagues and her one friend and her boyfriend and his parents. So I wanted to start off with this whole idea of happiness, right? So as I said, she's got money. She's got pretty much everything that money can buy you. And she herself at some point says, "This is everything. I have everything." But yes, she's deeply, deeply unhappy. So I was just wondering, money, at what point do you stop chasing money? Well, the majority of us chase money, we want wealth, right? But we also realize that money doesn't buy us everything that we want. So why do you continuously chase money? At what point is enough enough? Taiwan.
Well, I think the reason we chase money is because it's what is expected of us. And also,
By who though?
well, that's what I'm about to say. It's expected of us because, number one, you're socialized from when you're in the home to be prepared to get into the schooling environment. You're further socialized when you're in school to be prepared to get into the working environment. And then when you get into the working environment, you're one of many fish that are all swimming downstream. Now, if you're to turn around and start swimming upstream, it would seem very odd. So unless you have some kind of revelation or some kind of plan or some kind of totally independent thought process, you're just going to follow the crowd, which is what the majority of people do. You're expected to go to school, you're expected to maybe get married, have a family, work, get your house, car, whatever, and then die. These are the things that are expected of you. But some people buck the expectation because they are kind of independent thinkers. Maybe they have a plan. And so I think she was one of those kind of people, as probably the majority of us are. We do what is expected of us because that's what you do. And I think that was the problem, or a problem for her, to always do what is expected of her, what she thinks, how she perceives her folks, society, her work colleagues, etc., how they expect her to behave, as in conform, do the things that are expected of you.
But at what point do you then say that, you know what, this is enough? This is what's expected of me, but also this is my life. I need to live the kind of life that I want.
Well, that's the frustrating thing with the book for me, is that you get this stream of consciousness that you get used to. You get used to the style, but it never seems like she gets to the point where she properly questions. She brings up all these issues, and there is a bit, I noticed the second time I was reading it, somewhere I should think about 2/3 through, where she's saying that she's got the time to reflect at that moment, but she's kind of scared of that. She should be doing emails, she should be doing whatever. So I got the picture then of a woman who actually doesn't reflect at all. She just, like the hamster in the wheel, keeps going, which is strange when you're someone who clearly she must be intelligent to have got where she's got to. She's obviously got a good degree and she's done very well in her company. And yet you're not using your brain. It's I find that a bit strange. And,
Yeah,
and and even she is using her brain because she picks out all these things about colonialism and sexism and all these issues around her. And yet she doesn't seem to be able to look at herself.
she comes across as in a state of paralysis for me, right? So she, as you said, she recognizes all these issues, but she's unable to do anything about it. It's the same as her illness. She recognizes and realizes that she's sick, but decides, it's too difficult to make a choice. Well, choosing not to choose is also a choice, but yeah.
No, yeah, I didn't know what she wanted. It's as if she was, like Katrina said, she spoke on a lot of important issues, things we've all, as I think we've heard before, but she touched on some really important points. I don't necessarily think that there was anything that she could have done. I don't feel like she was really trying to do anything. I don't know what she wanted, but at the same time, I don't think she was trying to do anything to kind of combat that. Like you said, Katrina, she was either just going onto her emails to try to deflect from thinking about things too much, whilst even though she was at the same time. Then you get the option of being able to save yourself. You're sick, but she doesn't want to. So if you're just going to cut your life short, then how can you make things better? I don't know. I just find it very complicated and just a bit cold. I don't know. Yeah.
The book itself or her?
Her and the book. A
Okay.
very warm person I got from that.
I found it frustrating when the whole issue of her cancer diagnosis was dealt with in the way that she dealt with it. I found as if, she's the kind of person that if she were my friend, I feel like I should shake her. She needs a good shaking. Because I would have
Yeah.
thought that the cancer diagnosis would have been some kind of a road to Damascus, experience that it kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? It kind of flips a switch in her mind that she just says, I'm gonna do it the exact opposite of what is expected of me because I've received this life-changing diagnosis. I could die. I could die within a couple of, I don't know, months or years or whatever. So I'm going to do what I'm going to do because I've got nothing to lose anymore. I've made my money. I'm going to quit, for example. But she doesn't. She continues to go with the flow. Maybe because it's easier.
But Taiwo, isn't that the genius of the book, though? In the fact that normally when someone's in that situation, they will have that epiphany moment and they will actually try and change their lives and then do things differently. Whereas in this instance, she doesn't. She actually just carries on in the same track.
She seems so depressed by it all, and I wondered whether the depression is in some way linked to her actual condition. Could that be an explanation? But she seems so depressed with her life generally that she just seems to see the cancer as a shortcut to her life and,
Yeah,
and as an escape route. Yeah, the book didn't enlighten me as to why she should feel so powerless.
Well, actually, that is a fair point. But coming back to the depression, for me, this book, when I read it, it left me feeling quite hopeless and quite sad and actually a bit depressed because it talks about pretty much everything or every bad thing that can happen to a black woman in the workplace. So you have abuse, be it sexual, be it racist. You have being made to feel that you've only got there because of your color or because you're a woman. And then you have this dread that, I mean, we probably impose upon ourselves this idea that everything that we do, we have to do twice as well. And we're just constantly on the lookout, waiting for someone to trip us up. So you have all of that. And the reason why I guess it left me a bit down and a bit depressed is because it just didn't offer any way out. It didn't offer any hope. And I just wondered what you all thought about the book itself. Did you enjoy reading it? Because whilst I really admired the style and the how the authors put it all together, and I think it's very cleverly written, this play on words, she's very descriptive in her writing. She says a lot with very few words. So I admired all of that. However, I just felt a bit down reading it, and so because of that, I didn't enjoy it. So I just wondered what you all thought about the book and whether you enjoyed reading it.
But I thought that was the beauty of it, the fact that it engages certain emotions, the fact that those emotions are negative, as in you feel hopeless, you feel a little bit down or depressed. That's by the by. I mean, the fact is, it engaged the emotions. And I would have felt that if there were a solution, if the author said, okay, this is the way out, and then the protagonist finds a way out, it's like she's spoon feeding the readers. I feel that it's better for her to say that this, or to imply that despite everything that she has, so materially, she has it all, or she has enough, or she has more than enough, and yet she's unfulfilled. So it's like you, the reader, go and do the homework or read between the lines. Don't chase money.
I think, yes, it's cleverly written, but for me, that kind of stream of consciousness thing, it's difficult for me. I didn't read the book, I listened to it. Maybe I need to read it instead. But I just lost focus sometimes because it sometimes didn't flow. Maybe it's not meant to flow, it's like a stream of consciousness, but I don't know if I like that. So I just like, I thought you were just talking about this person, thought, how did this come about? And for me, I just, because it didn't flow fully, and I know it's not necessarily meant to, but I couldn't concentrate throughout. Hence why I had to listen for the third time, partly because of that, so I can really grasp everything. And yeah, I was just getting quite frustrated with her as well. It's just very bleak. It didn't leave me feeling great after every listen. And I just also, the way it was written for me, I struggled to keep up with what was going on. There were parts where she wrote some really great stuff, and I've even made notes, and then there's other parts I just don't know what was going on.
Well, I think I felt a lot of the same as what you've just described, Annette. At first, you get into the way it's being written. You think, okay, and it didn't bother me too much. In fact, I didn't realise how few names were in it until you asked the question about it, Jackie. But there were points where I was a little bit confused who was who.
Yeah.
But I just sort of read through that. It didn't bother me. But I just kept thinking, all this is thought process is she was going to come to some sort of, not necessarily a solution, but sort of try something new, change the state of play. What is she going to do? And I thought, oh, maybe she won't get on the train. That would be more interesting. Or when she's at the house, maybe she's going to, I don't know, create
Cause a bit of a
scene
stir.
or something. But nothing ever seemed to really happen.
Yeah, but it is that kind of book where nothing actually happens. It's just a stream of consciousness. We're just basically seeing what goes on in her head and how I was going to say processes things, but actually she doesn't even process things. She just thinks about them.
Don't we all do that?
Well, but do you just do that though? Do you not think about things and then decide or make decisions based on what you've thought, or decide on a course of action based on what you've thought?
I mean, you might mull over all these things and let yourself feel depressed, but if you're so unhappy, you usually start looking for something that will alleviate, if not cure, your problem. Like whether or not she really does want this boyfriend, or whether or not she really does need to stay in this job. After all, she's made a lot of money. There's just no sign of a change in the character. But as you say, Jackie, I think it's that sort of book. I think if I'd started the book knowing it was that sort of book, maybe I'd have tolerated it better.
Yes.
Instead of waiting and waiting and then realising I've almost finished and still.
You're still waiting at 100 pages.
Yes. But I suppose if you want to see it as, you said the deterioration, what did you say, Taiwo?
The mental deterioration of a parable.
Yeah, it makes more sense to me as a morality tale because, as I've said before, I can't imagine if you chase money, if you go to work in those big corporations because you want money, you may get money, but you don't expect to be happy at the same time. And I think that should be obvious. And if it isn't obvious, it would be for her now.
But the thing is, it's not obvious to her. Well, it is obvious to her, but she's not doing anything about it. That's
But
I
she
think
feels
that's
powerless.
sorry.
She feels powerless, doesn't she? She feels hopeless.
And that's part of the depression.
Yes.
That she's undergoing. I think that's possibly why she's so what's the word, indecisive, because she's going through this mental depression. One thing I noticed is that she only has the one friend.
We hear a bit about her sister and her mother, but not insofar that they feed into her thought processes, really, or that they're aware in any way of what she's going through. It's a bit strange, isn't it? It suggests they're not very close.
But interestingly, there was a section, a very short paragraph, where she talks about two sisters with 4 years between them, and one always wanting to do what the older sister does, the younger one always wanting to do what the older sister does. And then it turns out she's actually working 4 streets or whatever down the road in the same sort of institution. I was just wondering whether or not that was her sister, because at some point she says, and the older sister's powerless to do anything about it. She's following the same path. And if it's her sister, then obviously her sister must have, I don't know, interactions with her, because if they only work 4 streets down the road from each other, and she tries to do everything that her older sister does, then they must have some form of relationship. It just seemed that she didn't really relate to people that well.
Is that a symptom of her depression?
Yes,
and that possibly is a part of the depression. Yeah.
So if we're saying that maybe she's behaving in all the, she's going through all this because of her depression, and that's why she's powerless to change, is that a sort of circular thing, though, that all the issues that she's raised have brought her into the depression, or does she only see herself in that way because she is depressed, that she can't see a way out? I'm just asking. I'm just posing.
But it is a vicious circle, though, because
is that a chicken and egg thing?
Well, yeah,
one to the other.
Well, the way I would see it is that the situation within which she's found herself has now led her to be depressed. But because she's now depressed, she cannot get out of the situation. I mean, I can sort of understand how she feels working in that kind of environment. I very briefly worked in an organization that's similar. And the kind of things that you put up with, I mean, let's put it this way. I was depressed by the end of 7 months. I left the job without another job to go to, because I just valued my health. And so I guess if you're the kind of person who feels obliged to do things and feels like, I've been given this opportunity and I need to make the most of it, you're going to find it very hard to give up this really high paying role, although you're depressed and although it's affecting your health. That leads me to my next question, actually. So at some point in the book, she's basically saying that she traded in her life for a share of middle class comfort for a future. My parents and grandparents had no such opportunities. I felt I could hardly waste mine. And I guess this comes back to what you were saying earlier on, Taiwo, about how you are conditioned. So you go to school, you get a job, you pay your bills, you support your family back home. And I just wondered, as African parents or Black parents, do we place too much pressure on our children to achieve?
I think we do. For me, my parents weren't that bad. But comparing it to my friends, they really weren't that bad. I don't think they really, I mean, they care what they do, but I don't really care that much what I do. But comparing it to, for example, I had a friend that recently told me she actually wanted to be a chef. And she wanted to go to culinary school. And I had no idea. We've been friends for over like 25 years. I had no idea. And her parents were just like, no. So So now she's a solicitor. But I had no idea. They said, I mean, it was one of those, I think maybe just go to school first. I said it was all school for me. You're still learning something, but they wanted her to do the
The
traditional
career
route
thing.
first. If you're still really into the cooking, then fine. But yeah, so and I just felt bad. I was like, oh, that's your dream. She goes, yeah, I'm so happy with what I'm doing. But that was initially her first like love
That's
when she
love.
finished school. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think so. I think so. But it does depend on parents because, like I said, my parents would have allowed me to go to culinary school. So it just
Mhm.
depends.
Oh, I was pressurized because my parents wanted a doctor. They wanted a doctor in the family.
So did any of you become a doctor?
No, because none of us were very good in the sciences. I was kind of the closest one to get into the sciences. I failed my A levels first time around. Second time around, I failed the sciences again. So unlike my elder sister who went with the arts, I then
Mhm.
cobbled together two A level results to then get into uni, which was geography, social sciences, which I found so
Mhm.
easy. So if I'd gone the way I should have gone, which would have been social sciences or arts, I wouldn't have had these problems. I wouldn't have repeated my A levels, which at the time, when you're younger, and also it was a boarding school where I was a prefect.
Gosh.
So going back to the same place is like going back to the scene of the crime to repeat your A levels. It was devastating. It was really difficult, really very
Mhm.
difficult. I felt as if my world was ending that particular year, only to fail again, to fail my physics, my chemistry, because I was crap in maths. All my family, they're all crap in maths, but very good in the arts. For example, my brother wanted to go into international affairs.
Mhm.
My father refused, saying that there's going to be no job for you, no money. You should read law. He read law. He's a very good solicitor, but he's the one that got the foreign posting to Ghana, to Jamaica, to Trinidad and Tobago, to Turkey. And so we used to laugh about it and say, look, he still did some international affairs
Yeah.
through a kind of legal route. But it took him, who knows where he would have ended up if he'd actually read international affairs and followed his heart. So, yeah, my parents are very much traditional African parents. We want a doctor, we want a lawyer, we want an engineer, that kind of thing. It doesn't help, really. It doesn't help.
So I loved history, and I just decided I was going to do a degree in history. My parents and my mom wanted me to do business studies or something business related. I said no. This is my passion. This is what I'm good at. So I just decided that I was going to do my degree in history, and I did my degree in history. I mean, later on, I did convert to a law course, but I converted because I wanted to.
Because
It
you
wasn't.
wanted to, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't because I felt the pressure to convert to it. I do think that for my generation and before, I think there was a lot of pressure to be, as Taiwo said, a lawyer, doctor, engineer. And now, I mean, you have people being influencers on YouTube, and it's okay.
That's what my dad was even saying to me the other day. It's not too late for you to become one. I'm like, what? Or if you just get 100 views on YouTube, I was like, that's not how it works. It's not 100 views.
Did
That's
that, did that see money in it?
that's yeah. Basically, there's money in there. He said, just go for it. They just yeah. As long as I'm comfortable, they really, to a certain degree, they're not really bothered how the money comes in. As long as because I'm not saying they would have wanted a doctor or a lawyer. Of course they would, but at the same time, they know that I haven't got head for maths. I haven't got head for
Mhm.
science. So there's no point trying to force me to do it if I'm just gonna struggle. So yeah.
That's cool though. It's nice that he's actually now beginning to change how he sees the world, and actually that you can be something other than a doctor, lawyer, or an engineer.
It gives me hope.
Well, one of the things that the protagonist experiences in the book is a lot of condescending men, either hitting on her, making her do really demeaning things, or telling her that she's only got to where she is because of her sex and her race. Now, this got me thinking, do you think that it's better to have person who's that racist, cards on the table, tell you what they think, rather than a liberal person who don't necessarily recognize, that what they're actually doing is by its nature racist or even not helpful to you.
Well, I think you'll talk about the problem that's the stereotypical white man in those
Mm.
sort of corporate environments wouldn't want to go there, because I think there is that whole patronizing sort of attitude. Now, I suppose if you believe yourself to be one of those people who knows what goes on in the world and knows, and how can I put it, but that rather domineering attitude that comes across from some of those gentlemen, it doesn't really matter whether you're liberal or you're racist. You will be thinking you're right,
Mm.
and you know, because the liberals that are the cause of the problem in this situation are a problem because they think they've got nothing left to learn. And I think you would get that in that environment.
But how about the parents?
The parents.
And or even in particular the father?
Oh, I see. I thought we were talking about the office space.
Sorry, the father of the boyfriend. I
Yes,
should clarify. Yes.
I get what you mean.
Yeah.
I get what you
Yeah.
mean. I mean, I thought he was well portrayed, because people like that tend to be, I don't think he's got any issue with that's my impression. He didn't have any issue particularly with her, but his worldview is his worldview and he's got it.
Hmm.
He's not going to be making many changes in his worldview, I would think.
Because he expected her to be a member of the Labour Party. I mean,
Mm.
black people are
Wasn't
part of the
it a
Conservative
tease?
Party. Hmm?
When you see, when I read that bit, I saw it as, someone, they want to provoke a conversation. They sort of throw out something slightly provoking to just to make conversation. I don't think he would care one way or another. Whatever her answer was, it wasn't going to make a difference to him.
Sorry,
I don't know.
Anna.
I think he made a lot of assumptions, even with the Meghan Markle, just assuming that she would find that. What did he say? Was the inspiring? I think he said, or something like that. I don't know. Maybe I think if she'd kind of gone against what if she said she was UKIP, I think would have surprised him a little bit. I think he'd made up an assumption about her in his head, and I think maybe that's how he kind of wanted to see her. I don't know. I
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. He's got his way of viewing it all.
Yeah.
I think he probably was just trying to make conversation, because she didn't sound like she was going to be a great conversationist, did she? So he's trying to throw out some things to provoke discussion and no doubt to get to know her a little bit more. But in his head, yes, he's got the vision of it all, and whatever she says won't make much difference to it, I don't suppose.
It wouldn't make any difference to him because he's all right, Jack. His wealth and his class has already,
Yeah.
he feels that that's the kind of insulation that protects him from the vagaries of life.
But because he's right.
Yes.
Because he's right.
And he's male.
Yes. Well, the two go together. in that situation.
That kind of what you said just a few minutes ago, Katrina, kind of provoked a thought in my head about a scenario where she was in the garden. So this is when they're preparing for the party or whatever soiree in the evening, and she decides to go for a walk, and then she's stopped by this guy who is putting up the chairs and so on, and then he says to her, "A sister like you is just going to walk by and not, whilst I work." And she took offense at that. And that just kind of made me think that, do we overreact sometimes? I mean, he was just making a comment about, him being there working. And she's like, well, would he say that to anybody else in the house or anybody else at the venue?
Wasn't this the one that was saying pretty lady to her?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, I felt her feelings were quite reasonable, actually.
Yeah.
I don't think he would have said it. I don't personally think he would have said it to anybody else. I don't.
Well, you see, I don't know, because I just think that I just read that and thought to myself, okay, I mean, I think I just think that sometimes that maybe we just overreact. Maybe we are so heightened by by everything else that happens around us, so that every time something happens, we automatically see it within that prism of either sexism or racism.
But
We
isn't this what the thing about the sort of hidden racism, if you like, that you never do know, do you? Because, like you look at remarks like that, and I don't think he would have made it to the lady of the house. Would he have made it to a younger white woman there? We don't know. And that's why it's always tricky with these sort of, well, isn't that why it's called microaggressions?
Isn't that part of it? Because he's making certain assumptions. And I think the assumption is that because she's black, she can't be that important. If she were white, he's not too sure where she sits in the hierarchy of things. And so maybe he'd be thinking, yes, I'm entitled, or I feel I'm entitled because I'm male and she's female. She's attractive, she's maybe a bit younger than me. I could try it on, but I don't know whether she's a daughter of the house. I don't know whether she's the best friend of whatever. I won't try it on. But because she's not only female, but she's black, therefore, she's probably not going to be that important. So I can, I'm a male, I'm a man, I'm entitled to. I can try it on.
Like, but what is it that he's trying on? Is he being sexist? Is he being racist? What is it that? What's the crime here?
It's all of the above.
Okay.
He probably did want to know what her role being there was, and it's a sort of the silly sort of comments that get thrown out by some
Builders,
men in those situations, isn't it?
But also he's sounding her out, isn't he? He's trying to work out, okay, what is your position within the setup? I'm here, I'm a worker. What are you? Are you the help? Are you the girlfriend? Are you the bit on the side? What are you?
You'd think she'd have been dressed a bit more than you'd expect of the help, wouldn't you? But
yes, because when she does come downstairs, the mother comments, on the dress.
I mean, like, she could have been help. If you're going to be helping at a party as a help, you'd still have to dress appropriately. So
true, she could have been. Assimilation is an issue that comes up. And what do you think of assimilation? Should it be a requirement for society that people who come from others should try and assimilate into the countries that they move to?
Depends what you mean, though, doesn't it? Because
let's take France.
I tend to think yes and no. Yes, as in, if I go to Germany and I decide that, well, I'm a Brit. Well, am I? I'm Nigerian. Okay, I'm a Nigerian Brit. If I go to Germany and I say, no, I don't need to, I know that a lot of them speak English, I don't need to learn German. It's not in my interest, and it's not in the interest of the Germans for me not to learn German. But that doesn't mean that just because I'm in Germany, I should forget about my Nigerian heritage, my British heritage, or whatever. So it's assimilation, yes and no. That's the way I see it. I mean, a fundamental ability to engage with the environment that you're in and society and be an active participant in the world that you find yourself is to be able to communicate with your fellow human beings. And if you can't, if you're living in Tower Hamlets and you've been there for the past 30 years and you still don't speak a single word of English apart from good morning, then I can understand someone saying, how come you can't assimilate? How come you just live in little Bangladesh or whatever, eating your local food and, going to the mosque and back, and it's your husband that speaks for you, or it's your little daughter who's 6 years old when you go down to the GP. It will be telling the GP this is what she says. But you've been here for the past 30 years. So I can understand the argument for, yes, you need to assimilate to a degree. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't, if you, for example, buy fish and chips, supposedly the English national dish, doesn't mean you shouldn't put hot pepper sauce on it rather than, HP sauce. So assimilation, yes and no.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is you assimilate because it's in your own interest to assimilate, rather than because society requires you to assimilate.
But I think the point is how much is it duress? Because it's like I was brought up that if you go to another country, you should at least make it, even for a holiday, you should at least be able to, good morning, please, thank you, those sort of basic things. And you should, if you're living in a country, obviously, well, it's obvious to me, you should be trying to learn to speak the language. But I think with all the background of colonialism and racism and everything that this country struggles with, if you start giving people rules that you've got to learn this or do that, then people are going to push back against it, aren't they? That it's a sort of, then it becomes an issue of freedom, that you can't get your British passport or something unless you know a whole load of answers to questions that most British people don't know. I don't know what the questions are, but I'm pretty sure I don't know the answer to all of them.
So that's the citizenship test, isn't it?
Yes. I saw on the news today that somebody complaining that teaching the positive aspects of the British colonial
Empire, yes.
system. Did you see that? But the thing is, to me, this is ridiculous. If it's history, you just teach what happened. You don't have to say it was positive or it was negative. Everyone will work that out. If you just explain the facts as honestly as any of us are capable of explaining these things, why would you need to try and invent some positive part of it?
But the interesting,
just tell us what happened.
The interesting thing is the person who actually said it is a brown man.
Yes, but a brown man high in
on
government.
the outside.
Yeah.
He's got his own vested interests, hasn't he?
It's like, I don't like that term assimilate. I don't really, for me, I think part of what you're describing, maybe Tyro, is more integrate. For me, assimilate just means to completely devoid everything about who you are, like in terms of where you come from, just to absolve everything British, if that makes sense, whatever that might mean. Mm-hmm. So I may say, for example, this brown man might be assimilating rather than integrating. Integrating, I think, is merging two things together, whereas assimilate, that term would literally just mean I think she's Jamaican in the character Jamaican. That would just mean completely forgetting anything, or not forgetting, but refusing to acknowledge anything about your culture, your history, anything like that, and being fully British and that only. Yeah, I think they're two different things. And so, no, I don't like assimilate. So I don't like the term. I won't assimilate. That's not something I'd agree with. Integrating, yes, but assimilating, it's not. Yeah,
that's
but right. The interesting thing is whether you integrate or assimilate, you'll never be accepted.
Yeah, no, it's true. Well, either one, you will never be accepted. But assimilate is a very strong word, and it requires a lot of effort, I would say. We both do, but they're two very different things. I would say. Yeah.
And also, it can be very problematic, can't it, for the individual? Because if you're born in a black skin, and maybe you're adopted or fostered from birth by white parents, by the time you hit your teens or young adult age, then you might consider yourself to be British, and that's all you've known. But then society looks at you a certain way because you present a certain way. You look different to the average Brit because your skin is brown or your skin is black. And so people still say, oh, where do you come from? But all you know is Britain. And so you're saying, I come from Britain. I was born in Britain, raised in Britain, and all the rest. And yet society doesn't view you as a Brit. So unless you have something to hold on to, a sense of identity, it can be very problematic. The whole idea of, well, I'll just assimilate entirely. Because society is still going to view you a certain way, even if you don't view yourself in that way.
So coming back to assembly, the title is Assembly. I'm always frustrated. As you probably gathered, I'm always fascinated by titles of books and how people come up with them. So the title is Assembly. And when I initially, I didn't, before putting it on the reading list, I didn't actually read very much about it. And so I thought it was just going to be an assembly of her going to meet her boyfriend's parents, and it's going to be an assembly of people, and then the story is going to be centered around that. So I was very wrong. So why is it called assembly, and what is it an assembly of?
Of her? She's not just, I suppose, performing in a way, isn't she?
Mhm.
I think she even feels like she's telling lies to the girls that she's talking to in the assembly,
Yeah.
and I think she feels like she's also just not being authentic or true to herself as she's to her everyday life, and she's just performing. And so it's an assembly to everybody, to the girls at the school, in her workplace, her boyfriend, his family. Yeah, that's how I'm household.
Or alternatively, it might be disassembly, as in I'm going to disassemble the parts that make me a whole human being. I'm going to break them apart and see what is left to try and find out the true me, the real me. Because the thing is that
Mm.
for a person in her position, well, not just in her position, for most people, sometimes you have to bend in order not to break. So you go to the school and you do what is expected of you because you're the ambassador of this financial corporation that you work for. Even though you know that maybe 75% of what you're telling the schoolboys or is it schoolgirls is not the reality of it. You know, it's not the real truth, how it pans out on the ground. So, but you're towing the company line because it's expected of you. But
Mm.
I don't have a problem with that. You know, as long as you do what you need to do when you need to do it.
So you mean as long as you tell them what they want you to tell them during the assembly, but you go around the corner and tell them actually it's not like that.
Yes, but
Well,
I mean, she's on the payroll, isn't she? She's
Yes.
not she's not refusing to take the money.
Yeah.
So if she wants to work for a company that she's not prepared to speak up for, okay, I mean, nowhere's perfect. You can always have something to say about your employers. But if they're that bad, and she would not recommend, people to get themselves involved, it seems, well, it does, doesn't it? No wonder she's getting depressed and conflicted and doesn't know what to do with herself if she can't find a way through that.
but that's the thing for me though, because your expression when you said find a way through it. So, for example, in the instance of her going to the schools and telling the schoolgirls, you have a bright future if you pursue the sciences or whatever it is, maths and all the rest, and go into the
Mm.
financial industries. I don't understand why she can't apply herself because, as we all agree, she's very intelligent. Doesn't mean that she's necessarily that wise, but she is intelligent. Surely you can find a way to get the message across that for many of you, it's not going to be that straightforward without coming a cropper from your employer. So word
Yeah.
isn't necessarily going to go back to the employer that you're no longer on message,
Mhm.
but you're still able to warn them that, for example, you may need a mentor or you may need to look for certain alternative ways to get in, maybe
Mm.
climbing through a window rather because the door is not going to necessarily be open for you for various reasons. Surely she should be able to find creative ways to warn.
The point here, Taiwo, is that these diversity talks are never meant for the girls. It's all a publicity stunt. I would say, love-hate relationship with diversity and inclusion roles. Because on the one hand, you cannot
Mm.
be what you can't see, as the saying goes. But most of the time, it's just window dressing. These companies will employ the one diversity and inclusion person or one black woman. Most of the time, it's a black woman to head their diversity and inclusion
Yeah.
what's the word, program within the organization, and then she's left to it. No budget, no staff, and basically she's diversity and inclusion within the organization. So you're sent out to go and do all these speeches because the organization wants to show that it's doing diversity and inclusion. It's never really for the benefit of the people that you're going to see. It's always for the benefit of the company. It's a publicity stunt. It's a PR thing. So, as I said, on the one hand, you want to show young girls and boys that, you can get into any field that you want. But I don't think that the way companies approach it and the way that this organization in the book is doing it is the right way. Because she knows that that's the only reason why she's been sent there, because she's black and she's a woman.
Mm.
And she knows what it's like to actually work in that organization. But because she's getting paid, she still has to go there and do it.
It's not designed to provide opportunities for these young people. It's simply designed to tick a box for the company.
Mm-hmm. And if it was designed to work, we wouldn't need a diversity and inclusion role anymore.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, that's my beef with
Mm.
diversity and inclusion.
But I guess that the point that I was trying to make in a kind of roundabout way was that although she's probably not in a position to tell them, I'm the only black woman in the company, or I'm the only black woman at this particular level, and I've been pushed to this role because I'm a black woman and I have no budget, maybe she would be in a position to tell them that they may find difficulties, getting into this industry, and these are the reasons why they may find these difficulties.
But she wasn't doing that.
That's because she's not very imaginative, is she? She understands all these things, but she does her work. She does what people expect of her. She doesn't seem to be able, like, to create something different.
She could volunteer, do some mentoring on the side, work at a charity and organize it. There's so much you can do. Just not doing it.
Therein lies the rub, because the thing is that if she were doing these things like volunteering or mentoring on the side, if she were able to tell them that, you brown children or black children, you're going to face these particular problems because you are brown and because you are black, and breaks it down to them, she would then be able to live with herself and the way in which she compromises on a daily basis, because she's pushing back. Even if it's just a little bit of a push, she is still pushing back. But when you're not pushing back in any way, shape, or form at all, then you're just going to be going down. You're going under, you're going under, you're going under until you hit the rock bottom.
The trick is to recognize what is happening to you and then doing something about it, which is not happening in this instance.
But the thing is that she does have a level of insight, though, doesn't she? I mean, because when you're saying about the trick is to recognize, there are many things that she does recognize about the environment within which she's working. For example, there was that passage where, and I felt it was written quite beautifully, where she's talking about, I think they're going into this restaurant, and I think they're already a little bit tipsy, if not drunk. She's the only woman, the only black person, and she's the only woman. And I think when they're going in, one of them kind of gets her to one side, and I think he either kisses her or something like that. And then he says, nothing really happened, did it? But the way she describes it, he's an old man, he's an old white man.
With bits hanging out.
Yeah.
And a bit drunk. I was eating when I read that, and that just really made
But the compassion that she had for him, the insight that she had, that, she could understand his bitterness. She could understand the fact that he's been groomed or raised to believe that he's a master of the universe, and yet the empire that he's supposed to inherit no longer exists. People like her, brown people, black people like her, seem to have taken away the empire that he was supposed to inherit. So when it's his turn, there is no empire for him to, lead. There are no natives that he can say, go here and do this and do that. So she can understand his kind of flailing around, no purpose in life, because who is he going to rule? The empire no longer exists. And yet, despite her having which to me is quite a deep insight into what is driving this particular middle-aged or old white man to behave to her in that particular way and to view her through that particular prism, she can't seem to see it for herself. She can't seem to reflect inwardly and say, look, this place is going to kill me. I need to get out. The best thing I can do is survive. That's the best thing I can do. I need to get out. She can't seem to do it. So frustrating.
But I think you've summed up quite brilliantly how I felt about this book. The protagonist is clever and she's intelligent. She's capable of analyzing all these things, but at the same time, she's incapable of applying it to her life. The book for me is very well written, very well put together, but at the same time, those things that make it really good are also the things that I didn't like about it.
But is it that you didn't like about the book, or you didn't like about the protagonist?
No, the book.
Really?
It's the book rather than the protagonist. As I said, it's very clever, very clever use of words, very few words, but you get a lot out of those very few words. I didn't like that. It was just there was no narrative, there was no plot. It was just a set of snippets. And the other thing that I noticed, there are really no proper chapters. Some sections have headings, some sections don't. Sometimes you have a page with a heading, and then you go about 4 or 5 pages with one heading. And so I just found it bitty. But despite that, it raised a lot of issues. It made me feel a certain way. It provoked certain feelings. So it was clever in the way that I did all of that. But in its cleverness, it also made me not like it. So yeah, it was complete contradiction for me. And just to sum up, then, I know when we started off, one of us liked it, and then the rest of us were either on the fence or really didn't like it very much. And I just wondered if you've changed your mind at all, and what you'd rate it out of 5.
I like it even more.
So in the last time you gave it a 4 before, what would you give it now?
I'm giving it a 4.7.
Wow.
Wow.
I
That's
like it
really
even
cool.
more.
Have you read it a second time?
No, I think I need to listen to it.
Mhm.
I need to listen to it. What came to my mind just now was that, you know, that thing where if a woman goes out on a date, she's supposed to take money with her, because if the date pisses her off, she can just pay her way and just walk the hell out of there. Apply that same principle to this young woman. And I was thinking, why are you buying art? You know, you're buying original art. Maybe I've read it wrongly, but the implication to me is that this art maybe costs tens of thousands of pounds. There's an expression for that thing, isn't there? The money. Is it your get mad money, or?
Vex money.
Yeah, Vex money. That painting that you bought for tens of thousands of pounds, that's part of your Vex money. And you're buying art as if to say you're a white person who's coming from old money, that, you know, you can afford to do it. You can't afford to do that. The money you have is new money, it's not old money.
But Taiwo, art is valuable. You could always sell it for a lot more if it's original.
Rather than buy art with the hope that it will appreciate in order to sell it for more money, you could put a down payment on a flat or a house or whatever,
Like my dad.
or two, a buy to let or whatever. I don't know. It doesn't seem
No, but
appropriate.
if this is something catastrophic was happening, you
Yeah.
can't pick up the room and run with it. But I can pick up that painting from my wall, run, you know, flee the country and sell it, and I'll be okay. I can't pick up my home. So
Bricks and mortar always over art.
You know, we said she didn't have a plan, but maybe she did have a plan, and her plan was to assimilate, get the art, get all the trappings of white middle class life, marry the young guy. And now she's realized this plan is fundamentally flawed for her. You know, maybe that's why she's depressed. I don't know. I like the idea of it as a morality story because, as you said, Taiwo, because I think if you go and work in those big corporations, they say if you buy a long spoon to sup with the devil, isn't it? And I feel like you're selling your soul a bit to get money. No reason why you shouldn't if you want to, but know the bargain you're making, kind of thing. The other side of me just thinks it's a book which has drawn together all the many aspects of racism and difficulties in the world that she's inhabiting in the book, and they're just rehearsing all those arguments through her stream of consciousness without creating any sort of proper story. So that's interesting, and it's given us lots to talk about, but I still wouldn't give it more than a 3. The writing's good and all that, I'm quite willing to say so, but it still doesn't do anything much for me. That
How about you, Annette? Have you changed your mind at all?
not really. I was thinking 3, but now 2.5.
Ah,
Um,
Oh, Annette, I think you need to read it
should
actually.
I read it?
Yeah, even just before we came on, I was reading just a passage. She was describing Lou and how he comes in late. It's just a very short paragraph, and how she described it, it's just brilliant.
she nailed it.
Yeah, I think you should read it definitely.
Okay.
It's only 100 pages.
Yeah. That's why I thought I'd just listen. I said, oh, should I buy it? No, I'll just listen to it. I, I can see that it's well written, but I think also it's the way that it's written is the downfall for me because it wasn't for me. Like I said, it's that stream of consciousness and the way that it jumps around a lot. And I'm sure that's how everyone's mind works. I get that. But because there is no plot, it doesn't help me to follow what's going on. Because if you're jumping, but there's no story, I don't know what's happening. That's why I'm worried if I read it, because I can hear it, I can try and concentrate. But I know what I'm like. If I'm reading something and it's just not going in, my mind will also just wander. So I don't know if it will make that much difference. And then also, Katrina, like you said, a lot of the things that came up, I've read it before, and I know you said there might be morality like part within it, Tyra, but I've seen and heard these these stories and the way people feel in these industries. It's not really anything new for me. So not to say that obviously people can't keep writing about it, but I'm not like, oh, wow, that's so profound. It's not particularly, no. It's a new way in which it's been written, but it's still the same type of content. So two and a half, I feel so bad.
You'd have felt worse if you'd been sitting in the main discussion where everybody loved it.
Really?
Yeah. A few people gave it 5 out of 5.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
They really loved it. They just thought that it just tells the Black woman story, and it just puts it all together really,
Yeah,
really
it
well.
does. But then, so there's other books. I wonder what it is about this one.
I think I did an average score. So the average score, and this is because of Katrina and I, we brought it down to 4.2.
Wow.
People really, really liked it. I still stay with my 3 point, I think it was 3.7 or something like that. I'll stay with that. But anyhow, we have overrun again. again. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you for your very, very insightful comments. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. And finally, thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed this or any of our other episodes, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And don't forget to share. Till next time, bye-bye.